the announcement of the Second World War on the radio, or the wireless as it was known as then, because of course there were no televisions.
The broadcast, Chamberlain's broadcast?
Oh yes, I remember that, yes. And it's sort of the horror of it, you know, we are now at war with Germany. Yes, I remember that.
Yes.
And seeing the pictures of the Germans marching, and the terrible things they did in Paris, in France.
After the war was announced, our school was taken over as a hospital. So for the second year, we had to share a school with Devonport High School, which was in the Beacon Park area. And we went, one week we went to mornings for school, and next week we went afternoons. And that continued for the whole of that year. Then for the next year, our school took over a large house, and we began lessons there. So I was having a very disrupted education at that time.
Bill,
Yeah.
can you tell us about your training when you first joined up? Where were you?
When we first joined up,
Yes.
first in the town, we went into Aylesbury, and he gave us all our rifles, which were stored, all rifles from the First World War.
Really?
We thought, oh yeah.
And if you didn't know, you say that was a tank.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what half the British Army officers said. As far as they were concerned, they were tanks. The biggest difference was, of course, they hadn't got the armour.
No.
An inch of armour wouldn't stop anything.
No.
The tanks had got enough to protect themselves. And that was why I got blown to pieces, because we were sent where we shouldn't have gone.
Right.
What happened? We got hit, and there was a burst of flame inside the tank, partly because it had been hit in the front, and this is where all the gears are, and that gets almost red hot. If you could hold an egg there, you could fry it. You know, it really boiling hot oil, keeping all the differential that drove the gears cool, well not cool, but keeping them in working order. And of course that got hit, that sprayed flames over the whole of the tank.
I heard that my school was being evacuated to Cornwall, and I said to him, oh, I want to go with them, please. So it was arranged that I met them in Plymouth only a few days later with all my belongings to go to Cornwall. I didn't think a lot about it. I didn't worry about it. I just wanted to be with my friends and the people at school. So, and I remember we had to be at Plymouth to meet them one morning quite early, and of course there were no buses running early, and we didn't have a car in those days. And I can remember my mother and I hitching a lift on a lorry passing through Buckfastleigh on the way to Plymouth, and that's how I got down there to meet the school.
I had 2 evacuees stay with us at the beginning of the war from the Medway towns. To my mother's horror, they came with lice and fleas, which had to be dealt with. They didn't like the country very much. They thought it was boring. But the one exciting thing they did do was take me to the woods and leave me there, so that when he came home from work, my father had to go and find me. Luckily, I was quite happy singing away in the woods, so it didn't matter. My mother and I were in an orchard with other women picking cherries, and suddenly there were a lot of planes overhead, and I was told they were Spitfires, which didn't mean a lot to me except they were little planes going very fast and whirling round and round, and occasionally one would get shot and would collapse, into a field nearby. And sometimes the ladies would cheer when one of the planes with a cross on it went down. I soon worked this out. But when one of the planes with a circle on it went down, everyone went, ah. But I remember thinking quite clearly, it doesn't matter what they've got on the aeroplane. There's a man inside there and he's dying. And young as I was, I understood that quite clearly and can still see those pictures in my mind of the blue sky and these planes zooming around and shooting at each other, and sometimes one going down and sometimes them flying off safe.
Did you see much destruction in Bath?
Well, there was quite a lot. In the centre there was quite a lot of destruction.
And how about any of these historic places? Was there much damage to them?
Yes, I think they had to be repaired after the war.
And what you hear a lot about the Dunkirk spirit nowadays. People talk about that there was a better sense of community during the war. Can you remember that particularly?
Oh yes, yes. People worked together and helped each other a lot.
My father in the Home Guard had a lot of experiences, both serious, obviously, and funny. They were very prepared to give their lives if they had to. But on one occasion, they were being trained to use hand grenades because there were various plans on how, if the Germans invaded, they would attack secretly from woods. And so they had to learn to pull the pin out, count to 3, and then overarm throw the hand grenade to wherever it was intended to go. However, they were practicing behind a huge bank of earth to keep them safe. And so one by one they took their turn with a live grenade, pulled the pin out, 1, 2, 3, and threw it over this bank of earth so it exploded on the far side and everybody was safe. Kept their heads down, of course. However, we then got to the young boy who wasn't very bright and hadn't gone to war because he wasn't very bright. Nice young lad, but not very clever. Came to his term, he got the grenade, he pulled it out, 1, 2, 3, and threw it straight up in the air because he couldn't throw over. You've never seen men move so fast, my father said, in any direction except that. Much about them. I do remember one of the Land Army girls we had staying with us had a boyfriend, a fiancé he was actually, who was a rear gunner in a Lancaster bomber. And because he was in the rear, that's the area that got shot at most, and very few of them survived. But Uncle Ches did. But he was left with this condition, looking out into the dark, staring, tensed up into the dark. And I used to say, why does he always blink all the time? And Mummy said, well, that's because he has to look into the dark a lot from the aeroplane so he can see the enemy and shoot them. And I used to think, that's funny, why shoot people? But anyway, after the war, it took about 5 or 6 years, but he did gradually stop. The blinking stopped once he had finished this.